Sex is a tool through which we carry out the blessing of multiplication that has been made available to mankind. Are you following me? Very good. So, when a man wants to multiply or wants to create another human being, sex becomes the tool for creation. Are you following me? But to encourage multiplication, the wisdom of God had to add pleasure to that action. Are you following me? So, the pleasure you gain from sex is the reward that motivates you to carry out the command that God has given. So the purpose is multiplication, then the reward becomes the pleasure you gain from carrying out. So purpose and pleasure works together. Pleasure is found in purpose because pleasure is the first reward that a man gets for working in purpose. Are you following me? So God puts the pleasure of sex as a reward of obedience, because you obeyed the thing I tell you to do in multiplying. In that work of multiplication, you will have a certain form of pleasure. So sex is work, and that work is the work of creating another human being. There are deep things we will say. That work is the work of what? Creating another human being. But the wisdom of God, to encourage this work, he now added pleasure to it. So that's why you will notice, if you've ever done it, you will notice that whenever you are done, the pleasure will cease, because now the work is done. Are you following me? Yes. Because the pleasure you get from sex is just an incentive. I'm telling you ancient things, how it's supposed to be. The pleasure you get is just an incentive to encourage you to carry out the work of multiplication that was commanded you by God. So he attached pleasure to sex. Are you following me? You see, but what Satan does is that, and why fornication is wrong is that, Satan comes with another wisdom, and that wisdom is get the pleasure but ignore the purpose.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Remember, the pleasure is for those that are working in the purpose of that action. And that action has a localized system in which God wants that action to be carried out, which is the family system. That was why he gave Adam a wife. But Satan comes and tells you, you can have access to the pleasure without necessarily needing to carry out the purpose of multiplication. Because sex is just a tool with which you obey God's command of multiplication. And God gave you that ability to multiply so that he would not have to come down to create every single human being. So he said, human beings, you will have the ability to replicate yourselves. And to encourage that action, he now added pleasure to that action. So as you are carrying out the action of replication, there is a pleasure you and your wife will be gaining from it. Until that action is done, then that pleasure will cease. But Satan comes with another suggestion and idea, and that idea is take the pleasure but leave the purpose. Yes. And whenever purpose is taken out of the equation and pleasure is left, perversion is imminent. Say whatever thing that purpose does not come first before pleasure, perversion is inevitable. You cannot avoid perversion when purpose is taken out of pleasure, because pleasure is supposed to be a reward for purpose. Are you following me?
Yes, sir.
So Satan begins to bring ideas. Homosexuality takes away the purpose but leaves the pleasure. Hey. So a homosexual cannot give birth. He cannot multiply because the purpose for sex is multiplication. But they're in their perversion, take away the purpose for that thing and they enjoy the pleasure in a perverse way. Lesbianism, the same thing. Immorality, the same thing. So they are fornicating because they want the pleasure of that action. But if they have a child, they will abort it because they don't want the purpose for that action. Yes. So Satan's way of distorting what God intends is that he will tell you, leave the purpose but take the pleasure in it. I can show you ways by which you can take the pleasure, and that will begin to lead you into a selfish pool of perversion. So nothing of life can be born from taking the route of pleasure. So when you watch pornography, Satan is showing you an option by which you can enjoy the pleasure of sex, but there is no purpose. And God told me when He was teaching me, He said, anytime you do these things and you waste your life force, your sperm, He says your life force, and God hates waste. That thing you are spending there is life force. Something intended to meet an action. It is work. So whenever we begin to walk out of purpose, we begin to waste God's resources. Whenever we begin to walk out of alignment in purpose, we begin to waste God's resources. Yes. So Satan wants you to fornicate, but he will not tell you the purpose for that action of sex. He only shows you the pleasure it has to give, but there is a purpose. There is a purpose behind that pleasure. And you are not worthy to have that reward if you are not working in the purpose behind that pleasure. But someone will say, okay, but then Apostle, I don't have to marry. I just have to get my girlfriend pregnant. As long as we're multiplying, that's what matters. You see, God is a God of order. The Bible says, let all things be done with decency and in order. God, who in His wisdom incorporated the system of family and marriage, is not a fool. See, every life that is brought in this world, God wants that life to be raised in a certain way. Yes. And that was why within the family context, it was what God pointed out for new human life to be raised. Yes. Because every life that is raised, God is interested in that life. And God wants that life to be taken care of. So, that action must be carried out within the cycle of a family. So that when that child comes, that child can be taken care of. And number two, the structure, because I'll find time to teach about the family structure. The structure of the family is supposed to mirror a wisdom in God.
Yes, sir.
Yes. And that is why every child that is born on earth must pass through that structure of family. And if a family is accurate in God, that child is supposed to find spiritual knowledge from the structure of a family. So the child's first encounter about God is from his family. The child's first knowledge about God. I'm not talking about sitting down to teach the child just Christian religious knowledge. I'm talking about the structure of the family, the way the family is built in. It reveals a wisdom that reflects something in the realm of God. And the whole structure of the family is supposed to be the child's first point of encountering spiritual knowledge. Yes. Can we go deeper?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And you see, every human being that comes to this world carries a dimension of God. There are things in God that can never be revealed in one man. And that is why Jesus, who walked on earth, when he left earth, he spread himself in a body. So one man cannot host the full revelation of Jesus. Mark what I said. One man cannot host the full revelation of Jesus. But as a body, we can host the fullness of God as a body. Are you following me? And that is why giving rise to new children, giving birth to new children is very important, because every new children that comes into this world carry a piece of God in them. A unique piece of God that will fit into the puzzle of the body that we are created. So there are certain dimensions of God that you will never see until certain children are born, because those children are the embodiment of that piece, that unique piece of God.
Yes, sir.
That is lacking in the body. So Satan hates children. So that's why Satan is pushing abortion. I can stop the completion of the puzzle if I can stop children from coming. Where do you think the wisdom of family planning came from? It's from the word. Yes, and they tell you that you need family planning so that you can take care of your children. Listen, every children that comes to this world, God takes care of them.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Every child that comes into this world, God is powerful enough to take care of them. So part of Satan's idea is to limit children. That was why in those days, when God spoke about the high place, God abhorred one major thing they did in the high place, and that was the burning of their children. Satan taught them to sacrifice their own children in the quest for power, and God hated that practice that was carried out in the high places. If you read the Old Testament, you will see God's vengeance against sacrificing children to be killed. But Satan sponsors it, because Satan does not want purpose. Because anytime purpose is actualized, God is glorified. Yes. Every time we actualize genuine purpose, anytime you leave out your purpose from God, something in God's kingdom finds more advantage among men. So the Bible speaks of those that will rise to become lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. Have you not read that part? He said there would be lovers of pleasure. So God does not hate sex. God hates sex without purpose. Yes. Are you following me?
Yes, sir.
Sex without purpose. Sex is not for enjoyment. Sex is for multiplication. But within the action of multiplication, there is pleasure. And when that action is done, the pleasure will cease. So your body is not for fornication. That's what the Bible says. Your body was not created for sex. Your body was created for something superior to sex. God. That is why you can stay 1 year without sex, because you are not. The body is not for fornication. Some people want to get married. The only thing in their mind is the pleasure of sex. You are being perverted before you even started the job. You are being perverted. Find purpose, so you know that even childbearing is purpose. But when perversion enters and the quest for the pleasure of sex is what is put as chieftain in the idea of marriage, you people will pervert yourself. Have you not seen married couple who watch pornography and they think because they are married is okay? It is wrong. You are sponsoring perversion, and Satan is darkening your soul, exposing you to new ways to corrupt yourself. So in their perversion, someone can use the mouth that is meant for food as part of the sexual tool. Someone can leave the use of a woman and begin to look for a man. Bro, oh my God. Ecclesiastes chapter 10 verse 7 says, "Thou, O land, when thy king is the son of nobles and thy princes eat in due season." And they don't just eat, say for strength and not for drunkenness, pleasure. Drunkenness is only achieved when a thing is in excess. So he said, be not drunk with wine when it's in excess. So when a man no longer eats for strength, he begins to eat for drunkenness. I've not seen people, you know you've eaten, you've gained strength, but you keep eating. That's what fornication is. Fornication takes away the purpose of sex and only leave the pleasure there. Fornication kicks out the purpose but retains only the pleasure, and it looks for a way to perverse the pleasure so that you no longer eat for strength, you now eat for drunkenness, and drunkenness only leads to debauchery. You will lose control of your senses. You will begin to behave like an animal. Satan wants you to behave like an animal. When people get to a point where they are fornicating in public, an animal. See, when purpose is no longer there, it's animal instinct that is left there. You begin to behave like a dog. Have you not seen people who dogs turn them on? A demon is sitting somewhere. A demon of perversion and pleasure. That's how we can find deliverance, when we know that there is a purpose to this thing, but my body was not made for it. This thing is part of marriage, but it's only a small part of marriage. Am I saying something, sir? Yes, sir. It's part of marriage, but sir, it's only a small part of marriage. There's no love that the day you marry, that's the day you must do it. It's only a small part. We've been created to pipe something in eternity. Yes, multiplication is part of the plan. But when he put them in the garden, he said, tend and keep. Tend and keep the garden. Tend and keep. Tend that thing, that sphere of dominion I've given to you. Tend and keep. Tend and keep the garden. But you see, they only tended to the garden, but they didn't keep. They were lovers of pleasure. I came a Romelo come here. Satan is trying to raise a people that will love pleasure. You see, they will love pleasure, and the day you begin to love pleasure, you will no longer love God. He said, lovers of pleasure more than the lovers of God. That's why people can fornicate, because Satan, introduces them to the pleasure, but he does not show them the purpose. Just as he introduced Adam and Eve to the pleasure of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, but did not tell them that those pleasures were masquerading the evil that came with that tree. God does not hate sex. God hates the perversion of sex. And the perversion of sex is removing the purpose and taking the pleasure. The purpose of sex is only to manifest the mandate, the blessing of multiplication that God gave to man. And to encourage you in that action, he added pleasure to read. But pleasure is not the reason for it. That is why every form of perversion and darkness is seen whenever sex is carried out outside the circle of family. Yeah. So the guy will tell the guy, don't make sure you don't do it inside me. When you're about to release, remove. Wasting of the life of God. That in itself is an insult to Jehovah. God killed the man in the Bible for doing that. God killed the man in the Bible. If we don't address this thing, that is why homosexuality was born. Whenever a thing is not controlled, it becomes perverse. Yes, sir. Yes. And with perversion comes new ways of seeking deeper pleasure. Don't you know you can watch porn to a level that porn will no longer move you? Because a threshold, that you've reached a threshold. So you need something else to. Have you not read in the column where they say the needs of humans cannot be satisfied? Yes, sir. So instead of staying within the context of the purpose for the action, Satan begins to get addicted to the pleasure. And the more you find that pleasure, the more you seek for the pleasure you are seeking. Then it gets to a point, ladies, you are no longer interested in ladies, you now go for men. It gets to a point that you start going for animal. The only time Jesus said in scriptures that we should run is when the abomination that brings desolation begins to stand in holy places. When gay people become pastor, Jesus said, he that is on the mountain, don't come down again. Yes. There is an abomination Satan wants mankind to reach, where God himself begins to turn his wrath on mankind. That was the kind of abomination threshold that Sodom reached. Lord cried to them. He said, listen, I have girls here that have never slept with a man. They are beautiful. Let me send them to you. Do whatever you want with them. But please leave this man. They say, no, we no longer want women. We want these people. He said the men of the city. Men that should be in work. It means they saw these new guys came into their city, and a bank manager left his job and started running. The Bible said the men of the city. Someone saw the guy, he left his wife and his children. He said, I'm coming. Satan wants to baptize this world with all forms of perversion so that we will incur the wrath of God. Oh, Papa, Leko Besa. Very soon you will see a man on Sunday service. He will come out and he will remove his private part and will be sleeping with people live. That's where this world is going to. Listen, I'm saying, this world is going there. Listen, I'm saying, abomination of desolation will soon begin to stand in holy places. Very soon, this I'm saying is prophetic. Very soon, you start hearing about naked churches. Where the revelation is that you should come to church like Adam and Eve came. And people will be sitting in church and they'll be masturbating to themselves there. Hey, la kumela. And they will tell you that no, we are trying to return to how it should be, the primitive days. Satan wants abomination that brings desolation to come to holy places. Because the more Satan corrupts a man, the more he expands your threshold for corruption. Then it gets to a point, the person's mother is the one that is now interested in. When a 10-year-old girl and a 13-year-old boy can have sex, where were you when you were 10 years? We were playing Katabon and Robarin. The nation so you. I told you people that when Satan wants to fight the knowledge of God, what he does is that he increases the knowledge of this world. Smartphone came into this world and children started doing TikTok.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Children that should be reading their Bible became porn stars. Jesus needs to spend our life. Hey, if not, we will not have any gospel to preach to our generation very soon.